On the Buzz Meter this Sunday, the media combat over the release of the House Intel memo is fiercely partisan, with the right saying it undermines the Russia investigation and the left calling it irrelevant.
That's it. That's all they've got. What the memo makes clear: there was collusion after all, you bet. The collusion was between the Comey FBI, the Obama Justice Department, and the Hillary Clinton campaign.
After all that suspense and weeks of buildup worthy of an episode of The Apprentice, the reviews are in. And Congressman Nunes's memo was a dud.
It's an absolute disgrace. It is an embarrassment to the United States Congress. It is part of an effort to discredit the investigation of the President of the United States.
The highly classified FISA abuse memo has now been released, and it is absolutely shocking. It is stunning. Now, this now is the biggest abuse of power corruption case in American history.
There are also questions about the ex-spy who wrote the so-called dossier and his leaks to journalists. Sean Spicer, the former White House spokesman, joins us on the battle over the FBI and his experience doing battle with the press. And there's all-out media warfare over the Mueller investigation, the role of Hope Hicks, the ouster of the FBI's number 2 man, Andrew McCabe, and the president supposedly demanding loyalty from him.
It's tough to imagine a previous president overruling an FBI director, especially about something like this, where the FBI director is saying this memo is full of falsehoods.
This guy, McCabe, needs to be taken out in cuffs. They should not be paid by the American people. He shouldn't be able to dictate when he's going to leave.
With the plot thickening and tensions rising, is the rhetoric getting too overheated on both sides? Mixed media reviews for the President's State of the Union, with some pundits dismissing the appeal for unity as just words. Are these verdicts as polarized as most of the coverage surrounding this president? Plus, the sudden focus on Melania and the marriage. Is the press going all-out tabloid? I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. I was on the couch at Outnumbered on Friday when the Devin Nunes memo was released, and President Trump wasted no time in reacting.
What do you think of it? I think it's terrible. You want to know the truth? A lot of people should be ashamed of themselves, and much worse than that.
But before we actually received the document on the set, Fox's Catherine Herridge was on the air with exclusive excerpts.
What we understand is that a senior law enforcement official testified during a closed classified session to this House committee that without the dossier, this is the dossier that was funded by the DNC and Clinton campaign and compiled by Fusion GPS, the opposition research firm, they would not have been able to obtain at least one surveillance warrant for a member of the Trump campaign.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Rachel Bade, congressional reporter for Politico. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist and a Fox News contributor, and Jessica Tarloff, senior editor at Bustle.com, also a Fox News contributor. As we deal with some technical difficulties here, the look is a little different. But Molly, Fox News, The Washington Examiner, and The Federalist, where you work, all got advance excerpts of a memo in the moments before it was released, a memo written by a Republican committee chairman, of course. And this fueled criticism that it was a partisan exercise. Fair?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because The Federalist did not get an advance copy. One of our reporters was searching on House sites to see if he could get a copy as soon as it came out, and he found it through the old practice of reporting. And sometimes you can get things without them being leaked to you, which is something I wish more people in this town understood.
Well, thank you for clearing that up, Jessica. But there were some leaks, and if a Democratic committee chairman had written a memo and it appeared on MSNBC before everyone else had it, and the nation, you know, conservative pundits would cry foul.
Yeah, they absolutely would. So when the Democrat memo comes out, please don't leak it to anyone, because that makes my job a lot more difficult here if that's going to happen.
Rachel Bade, you were at the Republican retreat the other day at the Greenbrier. How much were the media focused on this about-to-be-released memo?
They were obsessed with it, to be honest. I mean, I was sitting in the gallery when Speaker Paul Ryan and Majority Leader Mitch McConnell came out for a press conference, and they were supposed to sort of be talking about tax reform and talking up the agenda in 2018. 7 out of 9 questions were about this memo. And it was sort of funny because one of those questions was, Speaker Paul Ryan, do you think Devin Nunes, who wrote the memo, should step aside for, the way he handled this? And he said, no. But listen, tax cuts are working, and the transition was particularly hilarious.
Nice effort to stay on message. The level of pregame hype here was certainly almost at Super Bowl levels. Molly, as I was reading the Devin Nunes memo, what jumped out at me was former British spy Christopher Steele, the author of the Russian dossier, it was said in the memo, lied to the FBI about his contacts with the media, and he was, quote, desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and passionate about him not being president. But it's not like the press had built up Steele as a man of great credibility. So how much did that tell us?
In fact, the press had built up Steele as a man of great credibility. They said the whole reason why the dossier was to be taken seriously or had been taken seriously within intelligence agencies and law enforcement was based on this man's credibility. And what we learned, like this memo was the first time that we'd gotten information that wasn't based on anonymous sources. We actually got some hard data with people putting their names behind it. For a year, we've been subjected to anonymous leaks and little snippets of information here and there. And here we learn that this guy was considered dishonest by the people who used his credibility to secure a wiretap, and that part of that dishonesty was related to how he had been talking to the media. Many of the stories that we got on the Russia narrative were in fact planted by the same people who were creating the Russia narrative and getting it into the FBI. This is a really interesting media story as well as an interesting legal and other story.
Right. Well, I've always referred to the dossier as unverified, as unsubstantiated. And remember, no news organization against BuzzFeed published it when it was being leaked or was circulating. But Jessica, New York Times headline today, one of many, Trump's unparalleled war on law enforcement. So the president going on Twitter claiming total vindication in light of the House GOP memo, which of course was released over the vociferous suggestions of the FBI director. But the press is framing this as President Trump versus DOJ and FBI.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what this is. It was very clear from the beginning that President Trump was dead set on making sure that he got in the way of the Mueller investigation no matter what. He doesn't want Rod Rosenstein doesn't want Rod Rosenstein there anymore. I don't think he's going to be able to do this on the backs of it, since there are many Republicans who are talking about this memo as, I hate using the term, but saying kind of nothing burger about it. Even though I personally do think there's interesting information in there that we absolutely did need to see. First of all, that the Steele dossier was not the only thing that the FISA warrant was based upon. We know that there were 4 judges that approved this, Republican appointees at that, who would never have done this straight off of the Steele dossier. We know that the investigation began with George Papadopoulos in June 2016. That's before the Carter Page re-up of the warrant. And we also now know that Carter Page in 2013 said that he was an advisor to the Kremlin. Right. So I think that the FISA court had good reason to be looking at him whether he worked for Donald Trump or not.
Well, let me jump in and ask you a political media question, Rachel, which is the Democrats argue, and you see this in the media coverage, and especially on some liberal shows and liberal websites, that the memo itself is misleading and has important omissions, a couple of which Jessica just touched on about how much other evidence was presented to this special FISA National Security Court to obtain that surveillance warrant. Has all of this kind of muddied the waters for what the Republicans hope would be this bombshell revelation?
Absolutely. I think there was just as much coverage and sort of balking at the process by which House Republicans released this memo without having the Democratic rebuttal, without approval from the FBI beforehand, as there was about the actual content of the memo. It was interesting. I was watching it all play out, just came back from the West Virginia Republican retreat on Friday, and I was watching Chris Stewart, who is a Republican from Utah, who is on the House Intelligence Committee, voted to release this memo. He was on CNN, and he was talking about this. They were asking him mostly questions about why he didn't release the Democratic rebuttal. If you were so confident, they were saying you should have done that. They were saying, you sort of you made this typically an oversight bipartisan process, partisan, when you left the Democrats alone. And, it was just interesting because we didn't hear a lot about the content of the memo for that couple hours. So, he at one point was like, listen, why aren't we talking about what's actually in this memo, which is this oversight question about whether or not the FBI can go to the court and present this information without saying it was from a Democratic opponent of the president.
There is reporting now that they actually did know that it was backed by a political entity. So that argument is flown out the window for Republicans.
Let me just jump in. Let me just jump in for it. Yes, that was reported that the FISA judges did know that, but not specifically that it was a Democratic National Committee or the Clinton campaign. Let me move back to the media. There's been an explosion of media reaction. And Molly, I want to get you in on this. So after this memo comes out, Carl Bernstein on CNN says we haven't seen such dark days for American democracy since the days of Joe McCarthy, calling the president, that's the current president, demagogic, authoritarian. And on MSNBC, Donny Deutsch says, our democracy is under siege. People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator. What do you make of that kind of rhetoric?
Well, there was very extreme rhetoric about the idea that if you were transparent about the way that the Department of Justice and FBI secured a wiretap on someone, that you're threatening the republic. That is itself not healthy to have that attitude there. There have been so many false things said about the memo, and you see them repeated throughout the coverage. Even, these claims that the memo was somehow inaccurate. The FBI did review the memo and had the opportunity to say if anything was inaccurate. They absolutely did think that Carter Page's past should be in there, but they don't dispute the facts of the memo. So when certain people come out and say that facts are in dispute, I think reporters have an obligation to verify that before they just run with that claim. And in general, everyone should take a step back and think about what this memo says, that a Hillary Clinton-funded opposition document invented, through the Hillary Clinton campaign, made it to the highest levels of our government and was used to spy on a Trump campaign affiliate, even though it is still unverified and still just as unverified as it was when they took it to the court and claimed that it had corroborating evidence that it did not have.
Carter Page, of course, the Trump people used to say he was just a low-level volunteer, and it's interesting he's come back into the spotlight. Now, Jessica, one of the things that really struck me was a story, a Yahoo story by reporter Michael Isikoff was actually cited in the memo as having been presented to the FISA court judges. And it was also revealed that Christopher Steele, who was sort of peddling this to news outlets, had met with Isikoff at Yahoo. And Isikoff was on CNN yesterday and said he was as surprised as anybody that he went out and confirmed the information that Steele gave him. And besides, says Isikoff, the FBI already knew what he was reporting. Your reaction to the use of the media or attempted use of the media at that time?
Well, it's obviously concerning, and I thought that Catherine Herridge did a great job on Friday. I was sitting on that outnumbered couch with you and explaining what circular reporting is and how dangerous that can be when everyone is just going around trying to find an outlet to confirm what it is that they've already said. But I thought that Michael Isikoff did a great job in explaining what actually happened there. And to the larger point about the Steele dossier and what happened then getting to the FISA court, this information was corroborated elsewhere. They didn't just show up and say, oh, this is good enough for me. They made sure that there were multiple sources. So this idea, which Republicans are basing all of this on, that only an unverified, salacious dossier was the backbone for a FISA warrant on a guy who's bragging about being a Kremlin advisor, by the way, is just unsubstantiated.
This is, again, something that the FBI doesn't dispute.
Hang on. Let me get to Rachel on this, because you have these other developments I just want to touch on. So Andrew McCabe forced out this week, number 2 at the FBI, a bit of report that the president had asked for his loyalty. You have the New York Times reporting that Hope Hicks, communications director, had said on a conference call with the president about that Donald Trump Jr. meeting with the Russians, that the emails with the president's son would never come out. Her lawyer flatly disputes that. Even if she did say it, doesn't mean that it's any kind of obstruction. So some journalists are saying, whatever the revelations about this FISA dispute and Carter Page, it doesn't really affect the current Mueller investigation. Is that a fair argument?
I think there are actually a lot of Republicans who are making the same argument, too. The interesting thing about the coverage this week on the memo is that there really are two extremes here. You have people on the far right saying, look at this memo, it totally undercuts the entire Russia investigation. Even the president has suggested this, that the whole investigation is a witch hunt, pointing to this memo. And then you have Democrats saying, oh, Republicans are just trying to undercut this investigation. They want it to go away. They're trying to protect the president. Maybe there's actually a middle ground here. Speaker Paul Ryan, Oversight Chairman Trey Gowdy, they've said this is an actual oversight question. What exactly do you have to present the FISA court in order to get a warrant? I mean, obviously, we don't know.
A lot more to say, but I've got to get a break here.
Sounds good.
Now, you may have seen me on Fox a few times this week talking about my new book, Media Madness, Donald Trump, the Press, and the War Over the Truth. It's available now at Amazon and bookstores if you are so inclined. Ahead, Sean Spicer weighs in on the media storm about his former boss and the FBI. But when we come back, the State of the Union gets some grudging praise from many pundits and then, boom, drops off the radar.